One of the real advantages of electric cooperatives membership is having a voice in our state's energy future.
Not a week goes by without important energy issues making headlines. These are issues that need to be discussed. And you should know that as policies are being developed, the cooperatives are looking out for our members, advocating what's best for you.
We are your friends and neighbors.
We are your local electric company.
The electric cooperatives.
We are Arkansas.
And welcome to the program. It's been a turbulent world in the media arena. The explosion of the internet and social media for news content has caused a number of traditional news outlets to struggle. It's given birth to a new wave of media outlets. Here to talk business is Blake Rutherford, Vice President for the McLarty Companies, former Director of Public Communications for Stoneward. Always good to be with you, my friend.
Good to be back. It's been a while.
Yes, it has. This is the reappearance, the rebirth of Blake Rutherford on television. Happy to be a part of that. Let's talk about what you did at Stoneward, what you do now at the McLarty Companies, to kind of set up for viewers a little bit of why you are such an expert in media and communications.
Well,
in my eyes,
I was going to say thank you. Between you and my mother, I've got expertise. Roby is Director of Public Communications at Stoneward, which is a full-service communications firm. Obviously, I drove their earned media side of the business, public relations primarily, but then ushered in with the collection of our team, communications in the digital age. And so as part of that, we studied media trends and understanding how news was being delivered, how consumers were absorbing news, and what kinds of things were happening from a behavior standpoint online. And that continued for a period of years, and at the McLarty Companies, as their VP, I still focus on communications issues, media trends, and from a business perspective, how news can drive revenue, interaction, and engagement.
So let's look at some recent developments in the world of news, let's, particularly newspapers. You have penned an op-ed for us on our website and in other places that people will find. The Washington Post, the Boston Globe, two very high-profile newspapers sell one to a local owner, one to the founder of Amazon.com.
Right.
Was this a matter of survival for these entities? I mean, what's your take?
I think it had to be. If you look at it from a revenue standpoint, then it certainly was. What made the Globe transaction so unique was the price. Obviously, the New York Times had bought it very high and then was forced to sell it very low. Which is the inverse relationship of how you want to do business.
Buy low, sell high. Yes,
right.
They taught you that.
And so, that drove headlines because a venerable paper like the Globe going for so little. The Post is an iconic newspaper, and so it had been a family newspaper for generations, and had been also the local newspaper of our nation's capital. And it sells to Jeff Bezos, the CEO of Amazon.com, who has no history in newspaper publishing, has no background as a newspaper reporter, and Amazon's business is very different than that of the Washington Post. But he's an innovator, and he's an innovator in the way that consumers behave, and with the Kindle and books and the things that Amazon's doing with its secondary businesses, he understands how to deliver content, which is critical in today's marketplace. And innovation online is transforming the news business all the way around. We're certainly seeing that here in Arkansas.
So do you see him just dabbling in some experimentation? Do you think he comes up with a game plan and says this is what we're going to execute? How do you think he might approach that?
Well, it'll be very interesting. He's certainly keeping the leadership of the Post intact. So he's not bringing in a new leadership team. And he's indicated, at least publicly, that while he might tinker, we shouldn't expect wholesale change at the Washington Post. If it is about traditional news delivery, which is to say we're happy to run a deficit, probably not much change. But if he's interested in improving revenue and driving sales, then I think you have to make changes. What those are, though, I don't know, because a new competitor has really emerged in that marketplace, which is Politico.
Yeah.
And Politico has incredibly deep pockets, as we know, with the Albritton family and what they're able to do there. And then the new investment they're going to make after selling.
Let's talk a little bit about that. Yeah, because they've sold Channel 7, was one of their stations. They had 10, I think, in their, or maybe 8 in their whole group there. So now there's $1 billion of cash almost to invest in Politico, an online, primarily news source. What do you think what do you invest in with $1 billion into an online media source?
I think you invest in technology and infrastructure. You need to ensure that your content can get out and continue to reach audiences in a variety of different ways, thinking primarily about mobile, but certainly the iPad and other devices that people are using. So I think you start with infrastructure, and then, as with all companies, you build around talent. And at newspapers that are having to lay off people, particularly people who happen to make a lot more money because they've been there longer, there's an opportunity certainly to poach talent. Politico's been on the other side of that, though. My good friend Jonathan Martin, who is no stranger to Arkansas, just left to be the national political correspondent for the New York Times. So there's some of that in the media industry, but Politico's going to be able to pay for talent. And then I think, again, you continue to invest in resources, which is anything from support staff to office space to whether they decide to branch out into other bureaus, and then being able, of course, to put people on the road, especially during election season, which is not inexpensive.
Politico is a free online news source. Here in Arkansas, we have seen the iconic Arkansas Times go partially behind a paywall with their opinion content, not necessarily their news content. That deal struck you as a big surprise.
It was a big surprise. I think in my op-ed I said it was a bit of a shock. And I think primarily because, and you're right, Arkansas Times is an iconic publication, but it was always an iconic free publication. You could find it on corners of downtown Little Rock, and you could then, of course, find it online. And when they pioneered the Arkansas blog, it really transformed, I think, the way that political news was captured and delivered in Arkansas, which was a significant achievement for Arkansas Times, and they built out from there. They've got a wonderful food blog. I wrote a movie blog for them many, many years ago, and they've continued to draw attention because of what their team can do through the Arkansas blog. But they've pulled that back now, and you now have to pay to access that content. It's an interesting move. I sense that it's one certainly that will help their bottom line, which clearly now is a need. But it's a dramatic shift for Arkansas Times.
What's the risk for them? Obviously losing readers.
Right. I mean, this is one of the unfortunate things, at least in my view, is that brand loyalty in the news business really doesn't exist. In my op-ed, I cite a study from a few years ago that when readers were asked about their media companies that were free, and if they decided to charge, would they pay? And 82% of them said no. That's just unfortunate, but it is the way of the world in consumer online behavior as it pertains to news content. If your source A for you all of a sudden charges you, most consumers think they can go find the same information from source B if it's free. And that's really been one of the big problems for newspapers online, because you have aggregator sites, Yahoo News, for example, where you can go read all of the Associated Press's content throughout the day. But on the other side of that, Roby, the New York Times, McLarty, they've instituted different forms of subscription models, and they're starting to make money. So it's not to say that it won't work, but I think it's going to be a challenge for the Times.
All right, we've got about 30 seconds left here. Another thing that you mentioned in there is the Texas Tribune.
Right.
And the fact that it's a nonprofit news outlet there. Is that a business model for unbiased, nonpartisan news?
I think the Texas Tribune would tell you that it is, but it's expensive, and it gives readers the same avenue in terms of free content. People can invest in the publication, but they have to be careful about their opinion content. You can't do endorsements, for example. So it's working for the Tribune. There are examples of where it hasn't worked. I mean, that's really ultimately the lesson here is there's a test and learn period. I just don't know how far along in the subscription model decision Arkansas Times is willing to go with that test and learn.
All right. I love experimentation. Blake.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me.
You're going to experiment in Philadelphia, and we wish you the best of luck.
I appreciate it. I'm very, very excited for Jessica.
Well, I appreciate
We're looking forward to it.
I appreciate you.